The chill of midnight hung in the cabin as 16-year-old Naomi Carter sat frozen in seat 1 Ampere, her boarding pass trembling in her hand. A wealthy passenger loomed above, his tailored suit brushing against her shoulder as he sneered. "This isn't your seat. Don't make a scene." The head flight attendant glanced at Naomi, then back at the man, and nodded without hesitation. Not a single check of her ticket. No questions asked. Gasps rippled through nearby rows, but silence smothered the moment just as quickly. To most, she was just a black teenager, out of place in first class. Naomi lowered her eyes, folding her hands gently in her lap, but the humiliation burned like fire under her calm exterior. What no one knew was that she wasn't just a passenger. She was a rising tech prodigy on her way to Geneva to present her invention. And in business class, her father, billionaire Dominic Carter, watched every second. His jaw tightened, his silence deliberate. The man above her leaned closer, arrogance dripping. "Go back where you belong." Naomi didn't flinch. She only reached into her bag, pulling out her phone with steady hands. The flight's engines hummed seconds from a reckoning.
Welcome to Respect Wins Stories, the place where powerful tales come alive. No matter where you are watching this video from, whether it is New York, Texas, California, or anywhere across the United States, or even from the other side of the world, I would love to know, where are you watching from today? Please share it in the comments below while you sit back, relax, and dive into a story that will move your heart and spark your imagination. Every story here carries a message, because in the end, respect always wins. Let us begin.
The cabin buzzed with low murmurs, but Naomi Carter stayed still, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her boarding pass, printed in bold black ink, still trembled between her fingers. Yet the man towering above her refused to look at it. "This is first class," he said louder now, his voice sharpened for the audience. "Maybe you wandered up here by mistake. Happens all the time." The head flight attendant stood beside him, her lips tight, her chin lifted in agreement. "Sir, please, take your seat. We'll have this young lady moved." Young lady. The words cut like a blade, dismissive and condescending. Naomi swallowed hard, but her gaze didn't drop. Around her, whispers rose like wind in a storm, some passengers uncomfortable, others entertained. The man smirked, leaning in close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "You don't belong here. People like you never do." From business class, Dominic Carter's sharp eyes tracked every movement, though his expression remained unreadable. He made no move to intervene, not yet. He had taught Naomi the strength of silence, the power of restraint before the strike. Naomi slid her phone onto her lap, tilting it subtly upward. The small lens captured everything: the sneer on his face, the complicity in the attendant's nod, the uncomfortable shifting of nearby passengers who said nothing. The man straightened, adjusting his cufflinks as if he'd already won. "Stewardess, have her escorted back to economy. She's holding up the flight." The attendant nodded again, but her eyes darted nervously to the phone in Naomi's lap. Still, she pressed forward. "Miss, I'll need you to stand." Naomi's voice was steady, calm, but it carried like thunder in the hush of the cabin. "This is my seat." The boarding pass lifted into the air like a verdict, seat 1 Ampere glowing under the overhead light. But still, the attendant hesitated, torn between policy and prejudice, between the ticket in her face and the wealthy man's influence. The man scoffed, his arrogance swelling with the silence. "Don't embarrass yourself. I've flown this airline for years. They'll take my word over yours." And for a heartbeat, it seemed he was right. The flight attendant's hand twitched toward the intercom. 2 other crew members stood watching, waiting to enforce the command. Naomi's phone screen glowed faintly in the dim cabin light. Recording, streaming, evidence that could scorch reputations in seconds. Her pulse quickened, but her expression stayed serene. She remembered her father's words. "The most powerful person in the room is the one who doesn't need to shout." The man leaned closer again, voice low but dripping with venom. "Go back where you belong, little girl, before I have security drag you off this plane." The words hissed through the cabin, and something in the atmosphere shifted. A few passengers stirred, uncomfortable, sensing the line had been crossed. But Naomi didn't move. She only pressed her thumb against her phone, sending the video into the cloud. Untouchable now. Her lips parted, not in anger, but in something more dangerous, calm certainty. At that same moment, Dominic Carter reached into his briefcase, sliding a leather folder across his lap. Inside gleamed documents that would snap this man's arrogance in two. The attendant froze as a chime rang from the cockpit. The captain's voice followed, clipped and urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a delay. Please remain seated." Naomi lifted her eyes, locking onto the man's smirk. Her voice was quiet, but it carried like a verdict. "You've just grounded this flight." The cabin felt colder now, a charged silence prickling over every row. Naomi Carter's phone rested steady in her lap, its camera catching every sneer, every complicit nod. She didn't need to say another word. The truth was already sealed, preserved in crystal clarity. The wealthy man straightened, certain of his victory. "Captain's delay or not, this girl doesn't belong in this seat. If the airline values its reputation, they'll—" "Excuse me." The voice cut through the cabin like a blade, calm, deep, authority woven into every syllable. All eyes shifted as Dominic Carter rose from his seat in business class, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone shifted the air. Naomi's lips curved into the faintest smile. She knew this moment was coming. Dominic strode down the aisle, a leather folder tucked under one arm. The flight attendant stiffened, unsure, but instinctively moving aside. He stopped at row 1, his gaze locking onto the man who had tried to strip his daughter of dignity. "Sir," Dominic said evenly, "you've just attempted to illegally remove a confirmed passenger from her purchased seat." He tapped the boarding pass in Naomi's hand, then opened the folder. Inside were neatly stacked documents, embossed with the logo of the very airline they stood in. He turned one page outward, and unfortunately for you, my family is a majority shareholder in this airline. A gasp rippled through the cabin like a breaking wave. The man's smug expression faltered, then flickered in panic before he tried to recover. I didn't know. I was only what?" Dominic asked, his tone sharp enough to slice the man's words in half. "Only humiliating a 16-year-old girl because you assumed she didn't belong? Only colluding with staff who were too eager to nod rather than check a ticket?" The head flight attendant paled, her eyes darting to the passengers who were now recording openly on their own phones. Her voice cracked. "Mr. Carter, I can assure you—" Dominic silenced her with a glance. "You assured this man of his entitlement, not my daughter of her rights." Naomi's phone chimed, a notification flashing across the screen. "Uploaded. Live. Already spreading beyond the cabin walls." The man sputtered, face flushed crimson. "This is absurd. I've flown this airline for years. I have influence. You have nothing," Dominic said, his voice suddenly soft, but heavy with finality. "Because right now, this flight isn't delayed for weather or traffic. It's delayed because of you." The cockpit door cracked open, and the captain himself stepped into the aisle, his jaw tight. "Mr. Carter," he said, eyes flicking nervously between father and daughter, "do you wish to file a formal complaint?" Dominic's answer was slow, deliberate. "Not yet." He turned back to the man, letting silence stretch. "Because the evidence my daughter recorded is already secured. The choice is yours. Walk off this plane quietly, or be escorted off, on record, for harassment and attempted fraud." Every camera in the cabin was aimed now. Passengers leaned forward, hungry for the verdict. The man's arrogance crumbled visibly, his shoulders caving as the reality sank in. His lips trembled, searching for words, but nothing came. Naomi met his eyes, her calm, steady as stone. "First class isn't about the seat," she said softly. "It's about class." The captain cleared his throat. "Sir, you need to make your decision, now." And as the man faltered, realizing there was no escape from the truth, the entire cabin seemed to hold its breath on the edge of watching justice unfold. The silence was suffocating. Every passenger leaned forward as though watching the climax of a courtroom drama. The man's bravado had drained from him, leaving only a pale, sweating shadow of arrogance. His jaw worked furiously, but no defense came. "Sir," the captain repeated, his voice clipped, "you need to decide." The man's shoulders sagged. "Fine," he muttered, barely audible. I'll get off." But Dominic Carter wasn't finished. He took a single step closer, his gaze never wavering. "Not because you choose to," he said quietly, "but because actions have consequences." He gestured to the attendants, "Escort him, and document this in the passenger log." The head flight attendant flushed crimson, fumbling for words, but the captain nodded firmly. "Yes, Mr. Carter." Two crew members stepped forward. The once proud passenger tried to salvage dignity, straightening his jacket, but the whispers and camera phones crushed him further with every step. Gasps turned to murmurs, murmurs to low chuckles. By the time he was led down the aisle, his face was a mask of humiliation. Passengers erupted some clapping, others shaking their heads in disbelief. A woman whispered, "About time someone stood up to people like him." A man across the aisle leaned toward Naomi. "Bravery looks good on you, young lady." Naomi didn't bask in the praise. She simply folded her hands again, her expression calm, her phone resting silently by her side. The storm had passed, and she remained unshaken. Dominic handed the captain the folder of documents. "Ensure this incident is filed. I'll expect a report from corporate by morning." "Yes, sir," the captain said, his tone heavy with respect. The head flight attendant, visibly trembling, finally turned to Naomi. "Miss Carter, I apologize deeply. I failed in my duty tonight." Naomi's gaze was steady, but her voice was gentle. "Do better next time. For the next girl who doesn't have a camera." The words struck deeper than any reprimand. The attendant lowered her eyes, shame flooding her features. As the cabin settled, Dominic returned to his seat, the faintest nod passing between father and daughter. A silent acknowledgement. Lesson learned, dignity preserved. The engines roared back to life. The delay over. The passengers relaxed into their seats, some still whispering Naomi's name, others scrolling their phones to replay the viral video already climbing into the digital stratosphere. Naomi Carter adjusted her seatbelt and turned toward the window. The reflection staring back wasn't just a teenager anymore, it was someone who had faced prejudice head-on and refused to yield. The plane lifted from the runway, but the man who had tried to break her was already grounded forever, his reputation scattering like dust. And in the cabin of that midnight flight, justice had finally taken its seat. The city lights glittered beneath the jet as it soared toward dawn. But Naomi Carter barely noticed. She sat quietly, the events replaying in her mind, not with fear, but with a steady sense of resolve. For the first time, she understood the full weight of her voice, even when spoken softly. Across the aisle, Dominic Carter observed her in silence. His daughter had faced cruelty with grace, injustice with composure. He had stepped in when the moment was right, but the victory had been hers. She had held her ground without breaking, showing not just the world, but herself what she was capable of. When the plane touched down in Geneva, a wave of reporters already waited. The video had gone viral overnight. Millions had watched Naomi refuse to surrender her dignity. Questions flew like arrows, but Naomi answered with quiet poise. She didn't speak of wealth or ownership or her father's influence. She spoke of fairness, of courage, of never letting prejudice dictate worth. "First class isn't just a seat," she told them, cameras flashing. "It's how you carry yourself." Those words rippled far beyond the airport gates. In schools, teenagers whispered her name as inspiration. In boardrooms, executives replayed the video, forced to confront the biases woven into their own systems. And in countless homes, parents pointed to Naomi as proof that calm defiance could shatter arrogance. For Dominic, it was more than public vindication. It was a father's quiet pride. On the flight home, he placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "You've inherited more than my fortune, Naomi," he said softly. "You've inherited the strength to defend what's right." She leaned into the words, her heart steady. The sting of humiliation she had endured was still there, but it had transformed into something greater, a fire she would carry forward. Weeks later, when Naomi stood on stage in Geneva to present her invention, the audience rose before she even spoke. Not for Dominic's fortune, not for her last name, but for Naomi herself. The girl who had been told she didn't belong had become a symbol of belonging everywhere. She looked out at the sea of faces, the applause echoing like thunder, and for a fleeting moment, she thought of the man who had tried to strip her dignity. He was gone, forgotten, his arrogance grounded in disgrace. But his cruelty had been the spark for something greater. Naomi smiled, her voice calm, assured, unstoppable. This, she began, is only the beginning. And with those words, the girl once dismissed as out of place lifted not just her own future, but the hopes of everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong.
And that's another story shared here on Respect Wins Stories. If this one touched you, inspired you, or made you think, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us bring more powerful stories your way. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or state in the comments, and let's see how far these stories travel across America. Remember, no matter the struggle, no matter the ending, respect always wins. See you in the next story.